Today's lesson will be on powers of 10. And what powers of 10 are kind of what they sound like. They are exponents on a 10 as a base power. And we can have both positive and negative powers of 10. So the first one I want to look at is I want to look at positive powers of 10. And these are numbers like 10 to the second power. And what that means, if you remember from 6th grade, is that the exponent tells us how many times to multiply the base. Well, so that means that we take the 10 and we multiply it twice. So it means 10 times 10, and 10 times 10 is equal to 100. And we can repeat this for any type of exponent, or any power of 10. So if we had 10 to the third power, that would mean that we are taking 10 and we are multiplying it 3 times. Which also would mean, so 10 times 10 times 10 would be equal to 1,000. I'm hoping that you will notice a pattern here about what our exponent is actually telling us. If you notice up here, the exponent is a 2. We have 10 twice, and how many zeros do we have? We have 2 zeros. Here, the exponent is a 3, so we have 10 3 times, or 3 zeros. And so that is kind of the pattern that will hold true. Let's do another one. Let's do 10 to the 8th power. And so that literally is going to tell us that we do 10 times 10 times 10, and so on for 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Which is a lot, but that's okay. It doesn't hurt us to have a lot of things written down. And here's where it's nice to know that the exponent tells us the number of zeros. We just put a 1, and then we're going to have 8 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now you're going to hear me keep saying this over and over. If I am going too fast for you, please pause your video. It's okay to pause. Catch up or rewatch if you didn't understand something. That's part of being a responsible learner. So the key thing I want to recognize for the positive, and it's going to work for negatives too, is that the exponent tells us the number of zeros. So that's what I'm going to put right here. I'm going to put the exponent tells us the number of zeros. And I'm going to highlight that. That is important information. This is information. I don't highlight everything on a paper normally. I highlight things that I want to stand out when I come back to this page of notes. So when I get home tonight or when I'm working on work tomorrow, things that I want to stand out are what I'm going to highlight. And I feel like it's pretty important for this particular, for powers of 10, that the exponent tells us the number of zeros. Remember, pause if I've gone too fast. Now this also works when you get into negative exponents. The thing with the negative though is that we want to get rid of the negative part. So I'm going to use my pink pen. And let's start with 10 to the negative 2. We can't just take 10 and multiply it twice because of this negative. This means we have to turn it into a fraction. It means we have to turn it into a fraction of 1/10, but we have to make it 1/10 2 times. 1/10 times 1/10. So it still told me that there's 2 tens. It's just that you have to do it twice. Now there are multiple ways to write fractions though. So we could write it like this. Told us the 2 tens. Another way to write it is just to get rid of the negative. Put it as 1 over 10 to the 2 power. Or to the second power. Or, know how we said up here 10 times 10 is 100? Another way to write this as a fraction would be 1 over 100, because 10 times 10 is equal to 100. So really, this has a lot of meaning. It has 3 different fractions that it means, but it also means a decimal. Think about 1/100th. If you know your place values, you know that means that we have the tenths and then 1/100th. So these, while not harder, they do involve a little bit more work. They give us decimals, they don't give us whole numbers. They give us fractions instead of just plain old tens. So let's try another one. Let's try 10 to the negative third power. So that still tells me I'm going to have 3 tens, but the negative part tells me they're going to have to be fractions. So 1/10 times 1/10 times 1/10. We have to do it 3 times. Or if I just want to get rid of the negative part, I can just put 1 over 10 to the third power. Or we could go back even, do it in this form. 1 over, well, 10 times 10 times 10 would be 1,000. Or think about that same rule that we said, that up here, that the exponent tells us the number of zeros. Well, my exponent was a 3, so I needed 3 zeros in my fraction. One 1,000th. Let's see. We have 0, our tenths, hundredths. We're going to put a 1 in the thousandths spot. Remember, if you need to pause and rewatch to see what I said, that's part of being a very good learner, is to go back and rewatch. So let's try another one. It might be a little bit longer, but that's okay. Let's do 10 to the negative 6th power. So that tells me how many tens am I going to need. I'm going to need 6 of them, but it's a negative, so it's going to be in fraction form. So 1/10 times 1/10 times 1/10. I need to do that 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice I even had to count to myself. I could do the fraction form where it's just simple. 10 to the 6th power. I can do the fraction form where I've done 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. I know what 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, that always gives me 1. But 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 gives me 1,000,000, and I know that because 6 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we don't deal with millions in the decimal place as much. We can count them out, but another way to know is that we have to have 6 zeros total. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then a 1 with our decimal. So let's see, that's the tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. So once again, I'm going to keep that one part highlighted. The exponent tells us the number of zeros. What you need to have right now at your desk is you should have gone over to the crate and gotten you a chart from the Powers of 10 notes section. And the chart is going to look kind of like this. Not kind of, it should look exactly like this. And our job now is going to be to fill out this chart. I'm going to do maybe one row with you, but then you're going to do the rest of it by yourself. You can use your notes to help you. This will end up being glued right here on the back. So I'm going to go ahead and glue mine in. If you want to wait and glue yours in after you've actually filled out the chart, that is okay. so you don't have to flip back and forth in your notebook. But just know that it will be glued on the back of your set of notes. And so let's look at that first row. They gave us in this one our exponential form. And I can see fraction 1, the first form they want is just the one where we make it into a positive number, or into a fraction. So I see there's a 1. That means I'm going to keep the 1 on top. I know it's a negative, tells me it's going to be a fraction. And then 10 to the first power. I got rid of that negative. I turned it into a fraction. I can see the second form is where they want it in more standard form. So let's see, I have 1. It's still a fraction. 1's always my top. Oh, how many zeros am I going to have? Just 1, so 1/10. This is a special one. There's really no fraction 3 on this one. But let's see, we have 1/10 as our decimal. We have a negative 1. So it tells me there's 1 0, so it would be 1/10. Because the 1 is in the 10th spots. And I will do one more row with you just to be sure. Because let's look at the next row. We don't have the exponential form. They've given us the fraction. But if I have 1 over 10 to the 4th, then I know, since it's a fraction, it's going to be a negative exponent. So it's 10 to the negative 4th. Fraction 2, well, it's a negative exponent, so I know it's going to be a fraction. How many zeros am I going to need? Hopefully you are thinking that you need 4 zeros. Ooh, fraction 3, we can do it this time. How many 1/10ths do I need to multiply together if my exponent was a negative 4? Hopefully you thought of 4. And then our decimal. So we have 1/10,000th. So I can, let's see, the tenths, hundreds, thousands, 10,000ths. And I can check myself because there should be 4 zeros total, including the one out here in the 1 spot. So be careful. The next row you're given the decimal, so you have to work backwards to fill this in. The next one you're given 2 pieces of information. They still mean the same thing. You will need to complete this chart and get it checked by one of the teachers in the room before continuing on.